Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is ANPR All Night Project Radio. I'm your host, Ryder, and let's just jump right in. I know the first thing you guys are going to ask me, and that's, Ryder, how's the snow situation? How's how's the snow? We haven't heard from you in a few days, so we're all itching to know, are you still going to complain about the snow first thing on this broadcast? Well, to be frankly honest with you, the answer is no. No, I'm not going to complain about the snow. And why is that, you might ask? Well, that's because the snow is gone. Snow is finally gone, and it's great. Completely and totally gone, and I'm finally able to drive without driving through slushy mush and whatnot. So that's nice. Again, I guess it's my fault for not not installing the snow tires on my car, but it's fine. And I'm sure I would have been just fine driving in it regardless, but I really didn't feel like going anywhere anyway, really. So, on the topic of the weather, we are sitting at 21 degrees Fahrenheit tonight. Tonight at 2:20 a.m., January 26, 2018. So, yes, it has become tomorrow. Though it'll be tomorrow or later by the time you're listening to this anyway, I guess. So there's not really any big surprises there. Precipitation is 0, and the humidity is 77%. So wind is 0 miles per hour as well. So right now, no rain, no moisture of any kind, and I'm pretty happy about that. I'll take it. If we can stay away from any sort of cold moisture happening, then I'm all on board for it, folks. That is something that I'm absolutely cool with. I know the question on most of your minds, probably going into today's broadcast, is, Ryder, what did you eat today? Well, I have an answer for that. The answer for that is this afternoon I had a deer bologna, cheese and pickle sandwich, and snacked on a few M&Ms throughout the afternoon. And then tonight, at about 1 o'clock or so, I went out to McDonald's. I splurged on a $1 chicken sandwich and a $1 soda. So that was my food. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I get a $1 chicken sandwich, my $1 chicken sandwich doesn't cost $1 like most people's $1 chicken sandwiches would. Why is that, you might ask? Well, let me enlighten you. When I order a $1 chicken sandwich, generally, of course, as everybody orders a $1 chicken sandwich, it comes with mayonnaise and lettuce. And that's how I believe the majority of chicken sandwiches across the board come. And that's, to be frankly honest, not the way that I enjoy my chicken sandwiches. I prefer to have lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, onions, and mayonnaise on mine. So mine, they charge 40 cents every slice of tomato. So my sandwiches cost $1.40 before taxes, which kind of makes it not really a $1 sandwich anymore, to be frankly honest with you. I did see that they have a new, I don't know if it's new, but McDonald's is currently doing this 1, 2, 3 menu deal where you can get, I think it's like a cheeseburger, a burrito. Actually, let me look it up because I don't want to say it wrong here. I have most of it memorized. McDonald's 1, 2, 3 menu here. McDonald's returns with the bold new dollar menu, the internet here says. So what do we have on this bold new menu? For $1, you can get any size soft drink, which I think most of us have known about for a while now. You can also get a cheeseburger, a McChicken, or a sausage burrito. For $2, you can get a bacon McDouble, 2-piece buttermilk crispy tenders, sausage McGriddle, or a small McCafe. And for $3, you can get a triple cheeseburger, the new classic chicken sandwich, a sausage McMuffin with egg, or a Happy Meal. So the chicken sandwich that I was talking about is, of course, the $3 chicken sandwich, the new classic chicken sandwich. And on that new classic chicken sandwich, it looks like it's got a different piece of chicken than every other chicken at McDonald's. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not a very big McDonald's connoisseur, and I don't really visit McDonald's often. I don't really have their chicken often. If I do, it is the dollar chicken generally, the poor man's chicken sandwich, as it were. But it does look like they have it says it's an all-white meat chicken fillet topped with deliciously sweet and tangy signature sauce and pickles, served on a soft toasted regular bun. The bun definitely, in this picture that I'm looking at, the bun leaves a lot to be desired. You'd think that they would spring for more of a signature bun or something to kind of decorate the chicken sandwich with, but I guess they don't. They don't feel the need for that, which is fine. I know a lot of people don't really care much for the signature buns anyway, so just a regular old bun here, and then their sweet and tangy signature sauce, which from the picture kind of looks like mac sauce without the onions, but I don't know. I haven't had it, so I really couldn't tell you. I was looking at it, though. I was thinking about getting it, only I didn't want to spring $3 plus an additional 40 cents for the tomato again, because I wouldn't eat it with only pickles and their sweet and tangy signature sauce. I can't imagine eating any hamburger with only pickles on it or only lettuce on it. I really have to have the whole thing, really. Like even the if I was to get just like a cheeseburger, which I don't really like the cheese, but even if I was just to get a cheeseburger, I think I would go with, generally, I would go with more than just the ketchup and pickles that they usually put on there. I'd throw lettuce, tomato, and onions on as well. I guess you could say Burger King's Whoppers, or their Whopper Juniors, is kind of more up my alley by default than any of McDonald's creations, due to the fact that Burger King, with their what was $1 Whopper Juniors and now is, I think, $1.60 or $1.80, at least around my area, that's now the dollar sandwich, which for about $1.60, I guess it's not terrible, considering at McDonald's I would throw tomato on it anyway. And the Whopper Jr., for those of you guys who don't know what comes on a Whopper Jr., it's their flame broiled meat, as always, and then it comes with mayo and ketchup, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, and onions. To me, that's an actual hamburger. If you invite me over to a cookout at your house and you say, Ryder, I'd like you to come over and hang out. We're going to have a cookout here at the house. We're going to, out by the poolside cookout. We're going to have hamburgers and hot dogs and potato salad and all that fun stuff. And of course I'd ask you, hey, do you need me to bring anything? And nah, we got it covered. It's fine. Perfectly fine. All you got to do is show up and enjoy yourself. All right, well, I'll see you there. So we get to the cookout or whatever it is, and you said you're going to have hamburgers. So the first thing I expect walking in to this hamburger promised event, the very first thing that I expect to see is a plate with some lettuce on it, a plate with some tomato on it, a plate with some onions on it, and a plate with some pickles on it, or at least a jar of pickles, wherein I can retrieve my own, and as well as your staples of ketchup, mayonnaise, probably some salad dressing there as well, and mustard. because that's what defines a hamburger. That is what a hamburger is. Of course, salt and pepper seasoning. I can't. It blows my mind. I've been to places, to people's houses, to family, to friends, and they make hamburgers, and they make them one of two ways. Generally, they make them one of two ways. That is, they have the frozen patties that they separate and cook, or they patty it out themselves. They get the tube of hamburger and they patty it out themselves. But most of the time, they don't add salt or pepper or any sort of seasoning to the meat at all. And that happens, I'd say, more often than not, at least to the events I've been a part of. Now, I understand if you have somebody there at the event who, can't have salt, something like that. But generally, you would expect at least they would make one or two with no salt and the rest could be normal. But for the most part, no. I usually end up running across burgers that aren't even seasoned at all. I guess I kind of jumped off point there. But anyway, a hamburger to me is defined as, at minimum salt and pepper, if not other seasonings as well. There could be a plethora of seasonings you could put with a hamburger, but at minimum salt and pepper. Or I guess I should say at minimum salt. I mean, I'd certainly like salt and pepper, but at minimum salt. And then that should be your meat. And then after that, then that's when you need to have the normal accoutrement. You need to have the normal things that you would add to a burger, which would be a bun, dressings, the typical, your trifecta of dressings, ketchup, mayo, mustard. Some people prefer salad dressing. Some people are weird, I guess. And I don't take mustard on my hamburgers. I don't. But I would like the mustard to be there and be available for a hot dog. And we can kind of move in right now to the way I prefer my hot dogs. The way I prefer my hot dogs are not burnt. I'd like them to be cooked, but not burnt. I know a lot of people do like that really crispy outer sleeving of the hot dog to be kind of burnt or crispy. I take my hot dog bun. I generally put mayo in the bottom of it, then the hot dog. Sprinkle diced onions on top with ketchup and mustard. And that is the best hot dog in my opinion. Unless you're talking about a chili dog, in which case we're getting into a whole nother zone. The Emerald Hill zone of hot dogs. So I guess that's a quick summary of how I like my hamburgers and my hot dogs, which is to hopefully help you understand my desire or need or reasoning for adding tomatoes, lettuce, pickles, onions, things like that to the dollar menu at places like McDonald's. Wendy's doesn't do a bad job either. Our Wendy's here, where I live, is actually a pretty poor Wendy's, but the Wendy's where I used to live was an amazing Wendy's, and they actually surpassed Burger King in terms of quality. When we were out there, used to live where we used to live, and Wendy's had their Junior Deluxe burger. And their Junior Deluxe is essentially a deluxe version of a cheeseburger. So what's your standard cheeseburger? Generally, it's ketchup, pickles, and cheese. Well, the Junior Deluxe burger was the same burger with ketchup, pickles, and cheese. And they would add mayonnaise. They would add lettuce, onions, and tomatoes. And so, in effect, it was essentially the exact same as a Whopper Junior. Albeit cheaper because it was just $1 at the time. I believe now it's around $1.20, at least where I live. And the sad part is that the local Wendy's is atrocious, absolutely terrible. It doesn't matter if you order your... Sometimes I'll order my hamburgers with no seasoning, because I'll at least... Maybe I won't get seasoning on my burger, but at the very least, I'll get a fresh one. Well, even our Wendy's doesn't give me fresh, even when I ask them for no seasoning. I feel like they just take a paper towel and they wipe off the top of the burger and move it on through. You can't get anything fresh from Wendy's. Their lettuce, the local Wendy's, their lettuce is more like wet paper towels than lettuce. Like, you know how lettuce is supposed to be crispy and fresh, perhaps dripping with the dew of freshly rinsed water. No, not at Wendy's. At Wendy's, their lettuce is like setting a wet paper towel over a disc. Kind of like melted cheese. It just kind of hangs there. And it is fairly disgusting. To the point where I won't eat there anymore. And I try not to eat at any of these fast food places, but sometimes on occasion you do tend to dive in, and what else can you do sometimes? Drinking some of my Coca-Cola with light ice from the dollar menu. This broadcast is not sponsored by McDonald's. I guess I should make that clear. Not sponsored by Wendy's or Burger King either. But anyway, in the trifecta of the fast food restaurants that I've been speaking of, the McDonald's, the Burger King, and the Wendy's, out of the three of those, the best in our area is the Burger King, which is still not really speaking about much. But their burgers are generally fresh when you order from them. And I recently had the Rodeo Bacon King, which is a monster of a burger. I think it's somewhere near $7. And it comes with 2 of their half-pound patties with cheese. It comes with bacon, lettuce, tomatoes, mayonnaise, ketchup, and onion rings, I believe, on their massive bun. Their quarter-pound bun. So, it's quite a sandwich. And it does not come with ketchup and mayonnaise. It comes with, I believe it's barbecue sauce and mayonnaise. So I take that back. I apologize. Very good sandwich. More sandwich than I can handle in a single meal. But it is a very good sandwich. I've had a few of them. It's not something I can generally get a lot of, considering the price. Nearly $8 for the burger, and $8 from a restaurant like McDonald's or Burger King is just kind of silly. When I used to go to Burger King rather a lot while at work, I would generally get their salads, and the salads are about $5.50. Much more doable than a $7 half-pound burger. And honestly, the burger itself is probably much closer to a pound with everything else. If only the meat is a half-pound, then surely everything else added on to it. Especially the 6 strips of bacon that they put onto it. It certainly adds to the weight of the entire burger. That, and then the sogginess of the grease that drips into the bun. It's quite a burger. It certainly is. Alright, well, moving on to this day in history. As I researched this day in history, I found out that apparently today, back in 1788, was founded as Australia Day. And as we all know, when Australia was founded, it was originally planned to be a penal colony. So today is Australia Day, as well as the day that the first Australian penal colony was established. I find that kind of interesting considering, I really wouldn't. I don't know. Looking at America, where I live, we don't, we weren't established as a penal colony. We weren't. But I would find it rather interesting if on, say, July 4th, we would celebrate we normally celebrate, our Independence Day, right? Well, if we celebrated the day that that America was founded, but then also that America was founded as a penal colony, that'd be a little silly, I'd think. I mean, a little weird. It'd be a little odd, at least knowing that. Then again, knowing that we have Christopher Columbus Day, and, well, Christopher Columbus was not the nicest person to the native inhabitants of America, so I guess we still have that sort of, all of our histories are muddied with terrible people and terrible things. I mean, we're human beings after all. The human nature is not to be nice to people. So I suppose it's normal. But let's read this here. On January 26, 1788, Captain Arthur Phillip guides a fleet of 11 British ships carrying convicts to the colony of New South Wales, effectively founding Australia. After overcoming a period of hardship, the fledgling colony began to celebrate the anniversary of this date with great fanfare. Australia, once known as New South Wales, was originally planned to be a penal colony. Arthur Phillip was captain of the HMS Sirius and was commissioned to establish an agricultural work camp there for the British convicts. With little idea of what he could expect from the mysterious and distant land, Phillip had great difficulty assembling the fleet that was to make the journey. He led his 1,000-strong party, of whom were more than 700 convicts, around Africa to the eastern side of Australia, and the voyage lasted 8 months. The first years of the settlement were extremely disastrous. Poor soil, unfamiliar climate, and workers who were ignorant of farming. It was hard just to keep the men alive. But Philip returned to England in 1792. The colony became prosperous by the turn of the 19th century. And in 1818, of January 26, 1818, it became an official holiday, marking the 30th anniversary of the British settlement in Australia. And as Australia became a sovereign nation, it became the national holiday known as Australia Day. Quite interesting. I recall reading about the founding of Australia in my history classes throughout the course of school. And there's actually quite a bit of things I remember from history, and I remember that I really loved history as I was growing up. And I really wish that there was some sort of job that one could go into concerning history that, would actually be a worthwhile job to get into. And I don't mean that teaching's not, but I think we all know that you can't really you can live as a teacher, but I don't think any of us are fooled into thinking that you can live comfortably as a teacher. Which I suppose is kind of ironic considering right now and the position that I'm in currently with work. Either way, the study of history, American history, world history, doesn't matter what kind of history it is, it's definitely an interesting topic for sure, and it's always at the back of my mind anyway when reading anything history related is the quote, and I don't recall who said this, but basically the idea of the quote is that history is written by the victors. And that could be said about any of the wars. That could be said about, well, even America, the founding of America. Imagine, if you will, for a minute, that an American history book written by a Native American inhabitant in the time of, well, the colonies. Imagine American history books being written by a person brought, say, from Africa to America and forced to live their lives and the lives of all their future generations for decades in servitude, in slavery. Imagine history written from those perspectives. And that kind of gives, if you can imagine that, that will kind of take you to where I'm going with this. And you can see what it means to say that history is written by the victors. And yes, we acknowledge, of course, the cruelties in the past of slavery and of what was done to the Native Americans. And we look back at that now, but it really is kind of a sad state of things. Huge atrocity that had happened, and the worst part is, to some extent, those things still carry through in pockets today. So it's sad to say we haven't really fully even learned from our own history. That's about as deep or as philosophical as we're going to get in today's episode. And we're certainly not going to be getting political at all. But I just think it's an interesting thing to think about for sure. Certainly is something interesting. In other news, this day in history, in 1979, The Dukes of Hazzard premiered, which those of you who are as old as I am, or perhaps older, will remember fondly. Well, certainly older as well. There's no doubt about it. I wasn't alive in 1979, but I do remember the Dukes of Hazzard show. Was an avid watcher back when I was allowed to watch TV. When we pretty much were only allowed to watch TV on Saturdays as kids growing up. But TV Land, where I grew up most of my life, spent watching old episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard or the Monkees or Bonanza. The other ones slipped my mind. Gilligan's Island. So many. I Dream of Jeannie. Amazing shows. Green Acres. Shows to this day. Andy Griffith. I'm just gonna keep spitting these out as they come to my mind. Leave It to Beaver. These shows were kind of the shows that I grew up on. So even though I was born in the 80s, I feel like I grew up, at least in my television watching, kind of in the 60s and 70s with some of these things. And the 80s, of course, as well. But yeah, so the Dukes of Hazzard, in 1979. I recall... I'm remembering the remake, the movie rather, the remake of The Dukes of Hazzard, which I believe, I may be wrong, but I think it actually had, was it Johnny Knoxville? It may have been Johnny Knoxville. Let me take a look here. It was Johnny Knoxville and Sean William Scott playing Bo and Luke Duke. That was an interesting film, quite an interesting film. It also, I believe, had Jessica Simpson in it. Jessica Simpson was in it too. That was in 2005. That was released the 5th of August. Well, I guess they missed the opportunity of doing a January 26th release, which would have been, I guess, a nod to the original fans, though I'm not quite sure that that's really what they were going for. I think they came out with another one as well in 2007, with different actors. The Dukes of Hazzard, the beginning. Yeah, yeah, that was totally different. That had Jonathan Bennett and Randy Wayne, as well as April Scott. So completely different. And yeah, I don't know. That did that have Willie Nelson? Yeah, it actually did. So they had Willie Nelson in them all. Yeah, which is kind of interesting considering that. I guess it was supposed to be an earlier year. It was kind of like Dumb and Dumber, where I guess, man, I remember growing up with all these old films. When we actually called them films, when they did Dumb and Dumber, they did the second Dumb and Dumber, and then they did the Dumb and Dumber, like the prequel, Dumb and Dumber. Now, I remember watching Dumb and Dumber as a kid, and I remember thinking it was a humorous movie, but also not getting any of the references. And I guess the same at that point could be said about Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, which was another staple of I absolutely adored that. I remember watching it as an adult and thinking, holy cow, there is an obscene number of sexual references in this. And I would not have allowed my younger son or daughter to watch at that time. Of course, nowadays, I don't think there's really much. Like, nowadays, most parents will look at something like Ace Ventura, and they would call that basically an E rating. You know, that would be something that they'd let any of their kids watch and not really have an issue with. Nowadays, when I was a kid, Ace Ventura was something you only watched with your parents so that they could fast forward or have you look away for certain scenes or whatever. And it's very different nowadays. I remember going to see the Titanic with my family in theaters. And of course, there was that scene where they had us close our eyes. 2 scenes, I think, where they had us close our eyes. And I recall, and I'm talking, I want to say 15 or 16 this next time when we had the Titanic at the house. And my sister wanted to watch it in a family night, movie night we had. So it was pizza night and that. And I recall when that time came, everybody was required, close your eyes, I was like 15, 16 at the time. Just close your eyes, don't look, Nowadays, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I recall when I was about 15 or 16, or no, maybe I was a little older than that. I may have been, no, I was probably 16. I remember distinctly having a conversation with a much younger friend who told me that his parents, if he wants to watch the Titanic, they just give him the VHS and they send him to his room and he goes and watches it. They don't even bat an eye about it. And I think he was around 12, 13 at the time. And it just, it really blew my mind. Of course, at the time, I didn't even know what the scenes were. I had no idea what the scenes were. All I knew is they were bad enough that I couldn't see them. I didn't know what bad enough that I couldn't see them meant. I didn't know what the definition of that was. I had no clue. And I guess that goes to show you the, sort of the time frame in which I grew up. It's very different than, the nowadays sort of environment. So yeah, it's quite interesting looking back at things like that. And seeing, I remember buying The Matrix from a pawn shop the day that I turned 18. Because I could finally buy an R-rated movie. I distinctly remember that. I remember it even more so because it wasn't the day I turned 18. It was the day before I turned 18. I was at my favorite pawn shop. At the time, I worked at a McDonald's. And right next door to the McDonald's was a pawn shop. And that pawn shop was my favorite. I went there all the time because he had so many movies. And they were all DVDs. I had a really crappy like word processor laptop that I used for school. And I would basically my nights where I would come home from work and I would watch a movie before bed. And a new movie every night is basically that was my play, as it were. I didn't have video games at the time, and that was just my way of enjoying the night. So this pawn shop I'm trying to think of the prices. I believe it was $2.50 a movie. It was $2.50 a movie. No, it was $2 a movie, or you could get 3 for $5. That's what it was. It was $2 a DVD, or you could get 3 for $5. And what I would do is and he also would allow you to trade 2 for 1. So what I would do is I would go in and I would drop, say, $10. $10 would get me 6 movies. So 6 movies would take me almost through the entirety of the week, right? So $10 for a week's worth of enjoyment, not too bad. So I'd pick up these movies, I'd bring them home, and I would watch them. I'd pick which one am I watching today, which one am I watching tomorrow, and I would watch out one movie every night. So supper, probably sometime around. We'd have supper at about 5 or 6. Chores or do whatever. We lived on a farm, so there was a lot to do. By the time I was done, shower, get to my bed, probably about 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then watch the movie. And I'd watch the movie, and then after the movie, I'd fall asleep, and that was my night. And so I would take these movies home, and I would watch them, and if I liked the movie, I would keep the movie. If I didn't enjoy the movie, I would take it back and trade it in, because I knew I was losing money by trading them in. But I was also saving money by trading in movies that I would never want to see again. So I would take, let's say 3 or 4 of the movies were good, the rest of them were terrible. I would take them back and I would trade 2 for 1, 2 for 1, 2 for 1. And I'd get other movies, and in that way, I would save up and collect. And by the time I was done, I inevitably had hundreds of DVDs over the course of, a year and a half or so that I worked there. Now, mind you, this was ages ago. This was back when I was 17, 18 years old, so minimum wage at the time was just barely over $5. So I was bringing home about $4.50 an hour. So, $10 for a couple movies was a little pricey, but it wasn't bad. It was like 3 hours work for a week's worth of movies. So I'd trade what I didn't like, and I'd keep what I did. And in that way, I learned a lot. I found a lot of new movies that I never had heard of before. A lot of movies that even to this day, probably would never have seen had it not been for that. I met some actors that I probably would never have seen a movie of during that time period as well. There was one movie, and I would look it up right now, but I can't really remember the name of the movie. And it had Edward Norton, and I think it was maybe Danny DeVito in it. No, it was not Danny DeVito. It was Robert De Niro. So if I look up Edward Norton and Robert De Niro, The movie was called The Score. The Score. This movie was so good. I genuinely enjoyed this movie. It's a crime thriller, and it was actually directed by Frank Oz, and that kind of stood out to me as a kid because I knew Frank Oz as, well, Yoda, you know. But it had Robert De Niro and Edward Norton in it, and I believe Marlon Brando was in it as well. Yeah, he was. Marlon Brando was in it as well. And it was basically, the plot of it was that I believe it was Robert De Niro's character had decided that he was going to retire, but there was just going to be one last score. And he was going to, he'd always worked alone his entire life. And he was hired by Marlon Brando. And he wanted to retire and get out, and he basically told Marlon Brando, he says, no, I'm done. And Marlon Brando says, well, I got one last job for you, as it always goes, with a huge payoff, and he had to go in and he had to steal this scepter. And it was not just a simple in and out safe cracking situation, because that was, you know, De Niro's character was a safe cracker. But the problem was that it had a lot of electronic precautions as well. And the problem is that meant that Robert De Niro's character had to work with somebody else. And he never had before, and he didn't want to. He always had a rule of not working with anybody else. Because the way he looked at it, they were all criminals. How can you trust somebody else? So you meet Edward Norton. The first time I had ever seen Edward Norton in any film before. I'd never seen Edward Norton in anything before. And he plays a janitor his character is actually playing as a janitor in the place that they are going to burgle. And he plays as if he has some sort of, you know, like mental handicap. And apparently he's been working for this place for months, like 6, 8, 10 months, earning the trust of the local people that work there. And the entire time he acted as though he had, you know, some sort of handicap. So, you know, he was able to use that way to kind of, to get into where he needed to go to be able to hack when he needed to hack, so that Robert De Niro could do what he had to do. And it was just a really good movie. And I thought, you know, the dynamics of the characters was very good. You know, the whole "it's my last heist" thing was kind of overdone, I think, even at that point. But interestingly, just the way that it was all worked together, and watching this whole thing unfold with two characters who don't want to have anything to do with each other. Neither one of them trust each other, but they have to work together to kind of get through their problems. You know, this issue they're trying to attempt to burgle this thing. It's $4 million split two ways. It's $2 million apiece. More than enough for Robert De Niro's character to walk away and be happy and live out the rest of his life. And he didn't have a problem with it at all. So it's just a really great a film, just in general. After that, of course, I did watch Fight Club eventually. And I got to see Edward Norton in that as well. And after that, I was pretty much sold on Norton as an actor. I mean, there was pretty much anything that I could see Norton in, I would watch it. The Grand Budapest Hotel comes to mind as another amazing film that Norton was in. Of course, that was just a great film overall, really. I believe The Italian Job was also another movie that he was in. And The Italian Job was just another great movie I could go on for a bit about. Now, we are talking, of course, about older movies that I haven't seen in ages, so, maybe looking back at them, they're not as good as I thought they were at the time, but I'm talking about most of these things are movies that I haven't seen in a long time. Was he actually in that? Google is saying that Edward Norton was in The Italian Job, but I'm not really thinking that he was. The Italian Job. I don't think he was in that. No, he was. He was in that. Mark Wahlberg played the main character, but Edward Norton was in it, it says. Interesting. See, I didn't even remember that he was in that. But there was another movie that he played in that Norton was in, and it was basically, I think he played as like a priest. And I'm looking for it here. Keeping the Faith. That's it. That was a movie I really liked. It was Edward Norton and Ben Stiller played with Jenna Elfman. And I believe Ben Stiller was a rabbinic Jew, and Edward Norton was a Catholic priest. And their friend was Jenna Elfman, who happened to be their friend in the, while they were all kids. But then they both kind of fell for her in their, when they became older. So that was also a pretty fun movie to watch. Because, they're both in religious positions where they're not allowed to have romance. So that was a pretty fun movie to watch back in the day as well. The Metacritic score is 60. So I don't know, I guess maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was. But I liked it back in the day. So it's interesting looking back at these films that I watched ages ago. And I only remember them from years past. Probably 2005. Something along those lines. When I was watching them, 2005, yeah, that sounds about right. That was when I discovered Ocean's 11 as well. And the Ocean's movies, I really enjoyed those. So. But I guess that's enough reminiscing about old movies for a little while. That'll be the end of this broadcast. I certainly do appreciate every one of you guys for listening, for coming to enjoy. And if you did enjoy, please let me know. Let your voice be heard. Let us know. Send us in a message if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything that you want. You can send us a message on YouTube. You can leave a comment in the description below as well. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. Ask some questions if you want. I can answer them here live on the air. Or just let me know if, maybe some of these movies I mentioned were movies that you enjoyed. Either way, you just feel free to let me know. But thank you for joining me this evening on this broadcast. This has been ANPR All Night Project Radio. I'm your host, Ryder, and have a good night. Thank you for listening.